You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. We now go back to our one-on-one interview with new Department of Children and Family Services Director Heidi Mueller. There was a hearing a few weeks back where I believe you testified in the hearing where one of the numbers that stood out to me was this, I believe it was 4% of children that of cases that DCFS looks into, 4% of the children in those cases are actually taken into state care. And I wonder, with that, I wanted some additional context, I guess, to that number, because is that it seemed low, I guess, when we're talking about, DCFS, a case significant enough for them to look into it. Only 4% of those kids going into state care. Is that something that the department looks at and says maybe that needs to be improved, or is that a better thing that 96% are deemed able to stay in their homes?
That is a really wonderful question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because it's a really complicated question. The thing about taking kids into care is, I think for some people, they sort of view that as a low risk option. They view that as, this is the solution to every problem. And the reality is, whenever you remove a child from the only home that child has ever known, that is a known trauma. That is an intense trauma for that child. And you are basically at that moment making a decision that's going to follow that child for the rest of their life. It is also a huge trauma on a family. And you're basically taking the power of the state and you're saying, we're going to determine who gets to have this right to raise a child, and we're going to determine who that child gets to be for the rest of their life. And so for us, it really is a success. The more that we can find a way for a child to be home safely, the better it is for that child, the better it is for that family. And honestly, we know that those strong, supported families are the cornerstone of thriving communities. So it's good for the community too. I think, the question for us is, we have a protocol. There are a lot of federal and state mandates that govern first when we have to investigate a case, but also, what criteria need to be met in order for us to remove a child from the home. And there are civil rights protections there. So we always have to make sure that we're being mindful of that. But for us, whenever we can, we want to find ways to support a family and make that family strong and safe so that a child can remain at home with, parents, with extended family members, in their community with people who know them and love them, and kind of form the basis of all the connections that we all need to grow and thrive and become healthy, productive adults.
In that same vein of questioning, does there need to be a greater focus on the following up after that initial investigation? Because obviously we've seen some cases that have gotten very high profile in that regard, where DCFS had stepped in at some point but didn't intervene, and in hindsight 2020 in a lot of those cases. But I wonder, does there need to be a greater focus on follow-up steps after that initial contact is made between the state and a family in these questions?
That is a really great question. And I, 6 weeks in, I do think that we have a solution in the works that is really going to drive good case practice as we go forward, and that's something called the SAFE model. It's something that, again, I have to give credit to Director Smith and his team for identifying as part of the path forward for DCFS. But what it is an evidence-based model that has been successful in, I think, more than 20 jurisdictions across the country. And it really provides this guide towards decision-making and case management for our frontline workers. So first, it helps guide them through that. If you think about it, if you put yourself in the shoes of a worker who's going into a home in the middle of the night, maybe investigating, these folks that they've never met, and having to make a split-second decision about something that could impact that family and child for the rest of their lives, we, as leaders of the agency, better be equipping them with all the tools we can to make those decisions well. And the SAFE model does that. But in addition, it provides sort of a guide for our caseworkers to follow as they do the follow-up, as they do the case management, both to create sort of concrete markers that families can meet in order for us to determine this is a safe home for a child to return to, or markers that say it is not safe yet and we need to keep a child in our care until we can continue to work with that family and continue to find the supports that will make the family safe. So the SAFE model is something that we are starting the rollout of this summer in June of 2024, and I'm really excited about it. I feel like as the new director coming in, I get to be part of something that started before me, but is really going to strengthen our work and really push us to a place of excellence as we move forward.
There has been these problems that DCFS has seen have stretched back decades at this point. A lot of them have. We've seen reports over just the past 12 years, but there was also consent decrees issued back in I believe the 90s on kind of levels that DCFS needs to meet on certain criteria. And I wonder, when you're coming into a position like this, the status of the department right now compared to where maybe those decrees say it needs to be, or where the conversation is about how well the state needs to be doing in these certain areas. How do you view reaching those levels? Is this going to be slow, incremental change when we're talking about filling these positions, creating these new spots for children to go to, or is this something that the state can take real actionable steps immediately to make significant changes in how this department operates?
Well, the answer is a bit of both. And coming into this role, I actually have experience coming into compliance with consent decrees. When I was at DJJ, when I first started, we were under 2 federal consent decrees. By the time I left, we had successfully terminated one of them, and we were within just a few months of successfully coming into compliance with the second. So I have experience moving a state agency into compliance with the consent decree, and I understand what that takes. I will say I have never experienced that happening overnight. It does take time, it takes work, it takes prioritization and focus because you can't run at everything all at once. But what I've found in my experience is that it is a mix of some bold actions, things like implementing the SAFE model that you do department-wide. Things like our planned rollout of Illinois Connect that is going to sort of bring us all of our technology into the 21st century and help us sort of meet deadlines, meet criteria, meet notifications really timely and automatically, and allow our caseworkers to spend more time doing what they're meant to do, which is work with kids and families instead of filling out paperwork. So there are those kind of bold things, and then there is the incremental change. There is, day by day, rolling up your sleeves, sort of quality control, following up week after week, setting targets, hitting those targets, setting a new target, hitting that target, and moving forward that way. And in my experience, what I found is that sort of both things are necessary. But I have had a lot of success in doing that, and I do feel hopeful about us being able to sort of move forward in this consent decree and start to make progress.
All right, before I finish up here, I have one more question. We've kind of alluded to it a couple of times, but when the search for the new director for this department started, there was a lot of talk about, okay, you got to find somebody who wants the job in that particular area. You talked about what your experience in DJJ helps you bring to the table for this position, but I wonder, why did you want this job? It's a very highly scrutinized position. I mean, honestly, what about this job made you want to step into this role that has been in the spotlight and has had so much turnover over just the past decade?
I will be honest with you, I was scared to take this job. I think that anybody who is smart and competent enough to take this job would be scared of this job. I'm a member of the public too. I've seen the media. I see what happens to the directors in this role. I mean, I've experienced it somewhat because I've been the director of a state agency for 7 years. But really for me, and I won't lie, I reached out to trusted colleagues and mentors and said, is this crazy? Should I do this? And they all said, it is crazy, and yes, you should do it. But for me, it really is a life's mission. I have spent my entire life, even before career, even when I was in high school, devoted to caring for kids. And, as an adult in my career, my whole career has been devoted to working with kids and families. It's really all I've ever wanted to do. And in my role at DJJ, I found that almost all of the kids I worked with had touched the Dcfs system. And I heard their stories. And I felt like the opportunity to move farther upstream and sort of help impact kids and families and help get them what they need before they get to the point of, coming into the correctional system was so appealing. The opportunity to sort of look at, especially, young women who are struggling, new parents, and finding ways to wrap around them and support them so that they can successfully raise their own kids, that's so appealing. There's a lot of work to be done in this state and in this agency, but I guess I felt like I had learned so much running a different state agency for 7 years that I really wanted to be able to take those learnings and all that experience and apply it to help even more kids and help even more families get what they needed early on so that they don't have to sort of cycle through these really sort of traumatic experiences and traumatic systems.
All right, well, DCFS Director Heidi Mueller, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. When we come back, we take a look at a pilot program from the state that helped food insecure areas across the state get access to groceries and why there may be a problem continuing that program going forward.